Today, question number 3, does God have the right person for everybody to marry? Yes, I believe he does. Though it's always dangerous to say that, because somebody's then going to say, what if I married the wrong one? And here's a real quick lens that can help you with this. 2 ideas. I think actually, in a sense, this will help you understand things like divorce and give you a grace, but also a truth lens on things like divorce. So catch these 2 concepts, if you will. God's will is prescriptive and God's will is redemptive. So I believe for all of us, God has a prescriptive will. I think God comes to us and says, this is how I want you to live. This is where I'd like you to live. I've got the right person for you. I've got the right, if you will, the Lord came to Israel. This is going to challenge some Calvinists, but get a Bible. So the Lord comes to Israel and says, look at the nations of the world. They have kings who rule over them and tax them to death, and tyrants, and steal their sons and daughters and gold. And God says, I want to be your king. Yeah, you don't need a king. You got me. I am your king. And what do the people of Israel do? They go, no, we want to be like all the other nations. We want a king. And they so insist they want a king. In the end, it's like God relents and God says, you want a king? Have a king. And then it's like the Lord lets them choose the king that they think they want. Saul, who is a man head and shoulders, not the shampoo, but above any man, a good-looking, tall, wonderful, the ideal choice, like the politician, the perfect representation of a species of the male. They choose this King Saul, and he's a train wreck. And then God comes to them. This is the same God who said, I don't want you to have a king. And God comes to them and says, right, you guys want to have a king. I will get involved with your choice, and I will choose a king for you. And he chose a man after his own heart, David. And then through David comes the Messiah and messianic promises, so much other things. So here's my point. I think God has a prescriptive will. And I think we should always start there and be saying, Lord, what do you want for my life? How do you want me to live? And I believe, if somebody's not married and wishes to be married, they should come and say, Lord, get involved in that choice. It doesn't mean we detach from that choice, but we're inviting Jesus into the center of that choice. And yet at the same time, I want to be really clear at this. It's not like there are people who follow God and then there are the broken people. We are all the broken people. We're the broken people who are attempting to follow God. So my point is, God's will is, I want you to do this, but then God's will is, I'll take you where you are, and is redemptive. So Jesus, I spoke earlier in John 4, he comes to the woman at the well and he says, you've been married 4 times, you're living with a guy, I want to give you living water. I want to get involved in your life. I want to bring redemption to bear in your life. So if you're here saying, Graham, I live with 20 people, I've been married 4 times, whatever, God comes to you and he says, great. Not great because of the things you did. Great that you came to him. And he says, I want to take the pieces, wonderful, broken, whatever, and redeem them and turn them into something good. So is God's will ever divorce? No. Though at times that is the right thing to happen. Come on, if you're watching this and you're married and when you're with somebody who's abusive, physically violent, sexually, emotionally, you're living under abuse, get out. It's not, well, oh, this is God's prescriptive will, so I've got to stay in that. No, I mean, get to a place of safety today. And if that other person won't engage in the redemptive plan of God, there is a legitimate place to say, I will end this relationship and not be abused in that way. That's not God's will that you go through that life of abuse, I would say. But so I think we should always be pushing into, Lord, what's your will? But pushing into, Lord, redeem the mistakes I made. And the great thing is, if you read through, like, let's say the genealogies of Jesus, it's so redemptive. He takes people, he takes the prostitute Rahab, he takes Ruth, and just all of these different stories, and they become the genealogy of Jesus. So it doesn't matter how much you feel you messed up yesterday. What do? This one thing you do, forgetting those things which are behind, you press into Jesus and watch him bring his redemptive power to bear on every part of your life. Boom, that's really good.